Welcome along to this edition of Beyond the Boundary. With me today is one of Lancashire's finest, Neil Fairbrother, who was a diminutive left-hand middle-order batsman for Lancashire and England through the 80s and 90s, played over 20 years cricket here at Emirates Old Trafford and was fundamental to Lancashire's one-day successes in those years. Well, Neil, nice to see you. Good of you to come back to the old place. I said Neil Fairbrother. With those names and those Christian names that you were given by your mother, it was destiny that you would become a cricketer, surely.
Well, I don't know about that. Unbelievable that I ended up a left-hander as well, that's for sure. But I think I did all right because our two favourite cricketers were Neil Harvey and Herbert Sutcliffe. So I think I did all right with my name in the end.
I've been called a Herbert a few times. But I mean, your mother and your father were obviously hugely instrumental in your development, not only as a cricketer, but as a person as well. I mean, what's your earliest memory of sporting interest in the family home?
Well, my dad played club cricket. And as I was growing up, he played at Earlstown, which is Newton-le-Willows. Mm-hmm. So I can remember as a 6-7-year-old lad going down there on a Saturday and a Sunday, and my dad's teammates would throw me balls on the outfield and things like that. Mum did the tees, and that was how our summer weekends were. And that I guess is my first cricket memories. And then because we lived in the village of Grappenhall, so Grappenhall Cricket Club was clearly nearer than Earlstown, and Grappenhall weren't taking youngsters at that time till they were 11 years old, and I think I was sort of 9 or 10, and Dad managed to sort of squeeze me in, and that's the junior section at Grappenhall.
You weren't just a good schoolboy cricketer, you were a pretty good schoolboy rugby player as well. You played for Cheshire schools in both sports. Which was your favourite growing up?
It was 50-50. You know, I loved rugby, like I obviously still love cricket. And the day that I signed here, Jack Bond offered me a 2-year contract, and he said one of the things is that rugby will have to stop. And actually, it was a sad moment and a sad day. And I played rugby at Lim Rugby Club. And enjoyed myself immensely up there. I still have good friends from all that time ago through the rugby connections, and I used to go and watch. And
I think it was a good job it stopped. I remember coming to watch you once, and it must have been probably in '82. So you might have just played. You might have been the winter of '82. Yeah. Anyway, I got there 5 minutes after the start to see you being helped off the field. And that was the end of that.
Well, it happened a few times on the cricket pitch as well, didn't it?
Oh gosh, did it ever. I remember that. One of your best innings ever, in my opinion, was at Chesterfield.
Yeah.
When you got hit under the chin. Was it Michael Holding?
No, it was Ian Bishop.
Oh, Ian Bishop. Crikey, yeah.
I remember
he was fast.
He was, well, before his back went, he was rapid, wasn't he?
He was.
He was absolutely rapid. And that was a quick wicket that day.
Think Queen's Park was one of the best pitches in the country, wasn't it, at the time? And I remember you got hit under the chin, and you had I think you probably had some stitches in the end. And I remember saying, "Well, what's the matter with you? Get out there now."
In fact, I think I can remember that as well.
Yeah.
And
purely.
So I batted with Foxy.
Yeah.
We were 10 or 20 for 2, and I batted with Foxy for 2 or 3 hours, and I remember we were both flailing it around everywhere, with our eyes shut most of the time, I think.
Yes, it was pretty fearsome. Anyway, back to your early years. So rugby had to stop. Yeah. You made your debut here in '82, but prior to that, you'd played for Cheshire schools and club cricket at Grappenhall.
Yeah.
Where was the leap between that and getting into Lancashire's?
So I played at Grappenhall, which was Cheshire, went to Lim Grammar School, which was Cheshire, although the school didn't play much cricket at all, but that enabled me to play for Cheshire schools. So that was 13, 15 and 19 back in those days. And I remember doing well as a 16-year-old playing in the under-19s. I did well against Lancashire under-19s. And I don't know if that was a bit of a catalyst for somebody at the club here to say, oh, there's a lad who plays for Cheshire that might be worth looking at.
It's interesting because there's always been a path. I mean, I was a Cheshire lad, played Cheshire schools, and came here and played. I played in the nets at Easter and had a club and ground game or two. But that you were a contemporary of John Morris, weren't you? Didn't you play together for Cheshire schools?
Yeah. So
and he didn't come here, did he?
No, but he was from. I guess he was from Crewe.
Crewe. Yeah.
Yeah, he was from the Crewe area. So we played all the way through together for Cheshire, and he clearly ended up at Derbyshire. So you know, it was, if you were minor county-ish, it was pot luck, wasn't it, to a degree. There was obviously a little bond between Cheshire and Lancs at the time, which I believe has got stronger as the years have gone on, thankfully. And now there's a bit of a pathway, hopefully, for lads from our area.
When did you become aware of your talent, and did you have the will and the belief that you could make it as a professional sportsman, either as a rugby player or as a cricketer? I
think it's something. I mean, I loved rugby. I loved playing football. I loved cricket. So it was just a hobby, and it was great fun to start with. It was around, we'd done the under-13s and the under-15s, and then I started playing for Cheshire under-19s early, and I immediately did well. So I think then you're 2 years young and you're doing well at under-19s, and all of a sudden you're thinking, oh, I might be all right at this. And then got invited down here, like you, played 2 or 3 club and ground games, and then played a second team game, and thought that I needed a new bat to play in the second team. So we went into Stockton Heath, which was a village next to Grappenhall, and there was a sports shop called Buller's Sports. And Mum and Dad took me in there, and I bought a Gray Nichols bat for the second team game, and it was about £3 too heavy.
No.
So coming to Old Trafford, it was here, we played Glamorgan seconds, and I couldn't lift the bat up. The ball was hitting the pitch and was quicker than anything I'd ever seen, so I had no chance.
And the combination of the two, the heavy bat and a quick pitch, no good.
Not good. Not good.
Oh dear. So that was a lesson very quickly and early learned. You used Gray Nichols in your early days, didn't you?
Yeah, very early.
Then you moved on. But, interesting. What weight of bat did you use then?
So all the way through my career, it never moved from £2.8. So that was start to finish.
Yeah.
Clearly, through my period, there were people that used lighter and there were people that used heavier. Now, I think the generalisation is that the lads use £2.10, £2.11 bats, but they pick up so well now. The bats are so big and they pick up so well that you pick a bat up and you think it's 2.7, and there's actually that much wood in it that it's heavier.
Here's a speculative question. Do you think you'd have been a different type of player with a modern bat? Because you were very much a batsman who structured his innings around moving the ball around, placing it in gaps, etc., etc. Would you have been tempted to play differently?
Well, you never know, do you? You never know. I do think that when we played, if I didn't hit the ball in the middle, then there was no chance of it going over the boundary. These lads at the moment, they're fitter, bigger, stronger, and they have bigger bats. So if they get half of it, it's still clearing the ropes, isn't it? You know, I never had that feeling. If I didn't middle it, it wasn't going anywhere. That is for sure.
Probably made you the player you were then, actually, because you had to be meticulous in the way that you chose your stroke.
Yeah, I mean, I think I look back at the way I played, and I think early on I tried to hit big balls a lot of the time, and it, hit my fair share of sixes on this ground, not like the boys today, obviously. And then I think realised that there was another way to play the game, in one-day cricket especially, and that was to hit gaps and run. And run hard, and that is how my game developed. And then I had a period where I mixed both very well, the hitting and the manoeuvring of a cricket ball, and then latterly I think probably went too far the other way towards the end of my career, where it was just nudging it around into gaps, whereas the game perhaps was going the other way, and that's when boundaries were needed.
Were you aware when you were playing, and you played 85 one-day internationals for England, were you aware that you were developing a style of play that was pioneering? I think you were the first, whether you were called it at the time, but certainly in retrospect, you were the first finisher in the international game.
I don't think at the time you realise that. The one thing that I enjoyed was the run chase. I enjoyed the run chase. I enjoyed being in at the end, and I enjoyed getting this team or the England team over the line if I could. And I got immense satisfaction out of that, and perhaps my game developed on the back of those feelings as well.
You were a great manipulator of the strike though, and also you were excellent at marshalling the lower middle order to chase down totals.
Well, it was great. The lower middle order here for many years was full of strikers of a cricket ball, which complemented often the way I was playing. And if I thought we needed a boundary or we needed the next over to go for a few, then we all had confidence in each other, and whatever the advice was, the lads were taking it. So, for long periods of time, there was Wasim Akram here, Mike Watkinson here, Warren Hegg here, Phil De Freitas. So all these lads, lower middle order, could all hit the ball into the stand. So when the time came, they were up for the challenge. And we complemented each other well. We knew each other inside out, and we trusted each other.
Let's just go back a bit. 82 you made your debut, but you didn't do anything in your first game. You were called out of nowhere, basically.
I was actually playing for Grappenhall on the Saturday afternoon. I heard the phone go at about 9:15, and Mum came running upstairs into the bedroom and said, "Jack Bond's on the phone, and they want you to go in and play for the first team." And I'd only played 2 or 3 second team games, not scored a run. So I turned around to my mum and said, "Somebody's having a joke with you." And she said, "No, it's Jack Bond." So literally jumped in the car, came here, and you were all in the nets at the back. So I came up into the changing room, was hurriedly getting changed, and it must have been 10:30 because you all came back in. And all of a sudden, I was surrounded by my heroes, people that were playing for England, people that had made the history of this club during the 70s and early 80s, and I was absolutely dumbstruck. Knew nobody. Clive Lloyd was captain that day, and he came over to where I was changing, introduced himself. He talked in this big, deep voice, didn't he?
Yeah, he did.
And I didn't understand
and
the word he
mumbled
was.
a bit as well.
I didn't know what he was saying. And he sat me down in the cinema seats that were in the changing room, and he put his arm around me, and I felt obviously ever so small when he was sat next to me. And the day just went from there, and we fielded all day. And on the way home, I had to stop the car, and I was physically sick on the way home, I think from the nerves of the day and everything that had gone on that day. And then Monday afternoon, when it rained, and then Monday afternoon we chased Kent's total, and I didn't bat, and David Lloyd got 150. And obviously Bumble at the time was at the end of his career,
Yeah.
and he opened the bat and got 150. I remember it being a wonderful knock. There were two knocks early that stood out to me. One was that day, and then the first year on the staff, we went down to Horsham, and again, it was only my third or fourth game, and Frank Hayes was at the end of his career as well, and he got a huge 100 at Horsham.
140 odd, I think it was.
Yeah, against Imran,
Yeah.
Garth LaRue,
Yeah.
and that innings also stood out, and those two were almost something for me to aim at. And Frank didn't play much after that either.
No, he didn't. It's interesting you say that, because that innings of Frank Hayes came after your debut innings, which
Yes.
didn't occur until 1983, and you made 94 not out against Warwickshire.
I did.
John Abrams was captain,
He was.
and there was tell us about the scenario there, because 94 not out was a hell of a total.
So obviously that was my first knock. My first 4 in first class cricket was a bouncer off a spinner. So the last over before lunch, Norman Gifford, remember Giff?
Yes.
And he had a penchant for bowling the odd bouncer. So he must have thought, well, let this young lad have it.
Yeah.
And he bowled me a bouncer, and I managed to get it away for 4. That was my first 4 in first class cricket. But later on that day, I think there was an agreement that we would come out at 250.
Bob Willis was captain of Warwickshire.
He was. And I ended up batting with Jack Simmons, and I was 94 not out, and I think we needed 4 to get to 250. And Jack said, we'll stay on now. It won't matter. We'll stay on till you get 100. And he hit a 6. And that was 250. And I looked round, and Bob Willis was just walking off. You know, he was the opposing captain. He was just walking off, and looked around again and could see John was in the doorway of our changing room, and nothing happened, and everybody just walked off. So I'm 94 not out, and I'm walking off thinking, well, that's I've had a good day here, 94 not out. Got into the changing room, and I remember you and Graham Fowler shouting as I went in, and then Jack came in behind me, and Jack threw his bat across the changing room.
I've never seen Jack as mad.
And Jack threw his, and he said something along the lines, if that's the way you want to play your cricket, you can all go and do one.
Yeah.
And clearly people were having a go at John, saying, why didn't you keep him out there?
It was a strange scenario, because I remember that clearly, and Bob just walked off, didn't he?
Absolutely.
Because Bob, I came to know Bob very, very well, obviously over the last 20 years or so, and that's exactly the sort of thing he'd do, you know. But there was a bit of mischief in him.
Yeah.
I think as he got older, he probably realised it wasn't the nicest thing to do.
No. Well,
but it affected you less than you probably didn't realise what was going on.
No, and I remember that night we were staying up Hagley Road somewhere, and we went in a Chinese, and there were about 6 of us round one of those big tables, and I can remember that. And I was just pleased that I got double figures.
You have got the best memory for games and occasions, instances, call it what you will, that I have ever come across in a cricketer. You and I played together for best part of 10 years, and I have very little memory of these games. And you just come out and can, not only can you say who was bowling, you would remember hitting your first 4, but I think inconsequential things. Where's all that come from?
I don't know, but I can't remember yesterday now. But I can still remember, you know, some of those things. And we got our own back on Bob Willis, didn't we? When we won the '84 Bensons. And
oh yes, we did. And you were out there at the end of that, weren't you? That was a fantastic day. It was our only success, wasn't it, for a period of time.
Yeah, you'd just become a dad, hadn't you?
I had the night before.
Yeah.
Ben was born on the Friday night.
Yeah.
And Bondy, bless his cotton socks, you all went down on a bus, I think, and he waited behind for me and brought me down in the car.
Yeah.
I didn't get to Lord's till 1 o'clock.
Yeah, it was late
in the morning.
Yeah, it was late.
That was a euphoric day. But we had some bad times in the 80s, didn't we? Really.
We weren't very good, were we?
No, we weren't. We kept losing games hand over fist.
You know, 80, 85.
85 was a bad year.
Yeah.
86 was a bad year, apart from getting to the final at Lords. Just before we go on with that, you've already mentioned Clive. Let's just talk a bit about overseas players at Lancashire. Clive was obviously an adopted Lancashirian and played for the county for 16, 17 years, maybe a bit longer.
Did he play that long?
Yeah, right. 68 to the mid-80s. Missed a couple of years when he was captain with the West Indies, of course, or playing with the West Indies. But we've been fortunate enough to have two of the very, very best in Clive and Wasim Akram. How much influence did those two guys have on you and the way you played the game?
Clive was, you know, he was left-handed. He was one of my heroes. So to share a changing room with him for 2 or 3 years was fantastic. Clearly, we didn't play like each other because he hit the ball
thunderously
hard.
Yeah.
But it was just for a young lad to be in the changing room with the West Indies captain, you know, a heroic figure was fantastic. I mean, that game, the final at Lords in '86, he got a duck, if you remember.
The first ball.
And he walked on and he walked off, and as he walked off, I was walking in. I remember having tears in my eyes as he was coming off, because, you know, it had been built up into his final, hadn't it? It was his last games for us. And he got a massive ovation as he walked on. I think the only person in the ground that wasn't clapping him on was Imran Khan that day. And then I followed him in. So, you know, he was a massive idol. But
your demeanour was distinctly different, wasn't it? You were nervous as a kitten before you went into bat, and Clive would regularly be asleep on the floor in the dressing room.
Absolutely. But with Waz, I mean, Waz joined us 88, and, you know, he was a young lad. So we actually, in many respects, he played here to 98?
10 years, yeah.
So in many respects, we almost grew up playing cricket here together. And, you know, it was amazing watching him develop. He came over and he showed the group of bowlers straight away reverse swing, and that clearly helped. It helped us, I would say, immeasurably from an older pro down to the young lads like Ian Austin at the time, who all of a sudden began to understand what reverse swing was, and I think it set us apart from other teams for a little while.
Well, Wasim became fundamental in Lancashire's makeup, quite obviously. He was one of the finest cricketers that's ever walked. But you were fortunate, I think, in being able to play in two separate eras of Lancashire cricket. You played in that team that developed from 87 onwards, and we won a number of one-day trophies through 89, 90. We started in 88 with the Refuge Cup, didn't we? 88, 89, 90, 91, and then there was another incarnation of Lancashire which developed around the mid-90s.
Yeah, I mean, 86, I remember we didn't win a championship game till August because we weren't very good. And I remember Steve O'Shaughnessy grabbing a stump at Leicester and running off like we'd won the NatWest because we'd won a championship game. So that's where our standing was. Then in 87, David Hughes took over as captain, and then Alan Ormrod began to
manager stroke coach, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, I was playing as well, but I've still to this day wonder what the difference was and what happened in 87 to make us we were challenging for the championship. We came second. What was the difference there? What
well,
happened?
if you look at the stats, I would imagine that a third of the way through the season we were the same as '86, and then by hook or by crook we won a couple of games. Lads started getting a few runs and a few wickets, and then we got on a roll, and we won. I think we won the last 8 championship games to end up second. And I think Yozza and Alan started putting a bit of discipline into the changing room and a bit of structure on and off the field into the changing room. And then, you know, those lads that had played well in '87 carried on, didn't they?
Yeah, they did.
And
from a personal level, did you start feeling comfortable in '87? Did you ever feel comfortable as a batsman? We know you're nervous. We know you spent time sitting in the back room in the loo and all that sort of stuff. That's just the way you were. But as soon as you walk down the steps, all gone.
Yeah, it was. I don't know why.
I never understood it. To be honest.
No. But you know, as soon as I crossed the white line,
yeah,
all the nerves and the worry went.
So did you start feeling comfortable there, or were you always uncomfortable during the build-up to a match or an innings?
Yeah,
or
I mean, nervous disposition, whatever you want to call it, and that never went away. You know, from the first day to the last here, that never went away. But you get more experienced as time goes on, and you learn to look after yourself, and you know your emotions, and you work from there, don't you?
I suppose so. Were the nerves worse, or was it just always the same, whether you were playing for England in a World Cup or whatever?
No, it was no different, whether it was Grattan Hall under 21s or the World Cup final in '92, it was just the same. And when I walked on the field, it was just the same the other way. So it was...
You've got a phenomenal record in terms of performance and longevity, really. You played in 3 World Cups. That World Cup final in '92, you were playing against one of your best mates in the game, in Wasim, and you very nearly got England over the line.
I mean, it was a...
Would that be one of the greatest and worst days of your cricketing?
Without doubt. Without doubt. You know, at that point we played here for 5 years together, and we'd become great friends, as you say. And that day we actually before knock-ups was lunch, and we actually sat opposite each other at lunch, and then we did our training, we went out, had a net, etc., and then he threw me a few balls into the net, and then the game started. Obviously he came in and got 50 when they were struggling, got them up to a good score. We were doing all right, and then he came back onto bowl, and we talked about him, you know, and I had to obviously talk about him and what do we do if it starts swinging, and all I could say was make sure you play with a full face. If you're trying to run anything down and it's swinging, it's
playing with half a bat at your peril.
Yeah. So it was full face, and Alan Lamb and I had got a partnership going. He came back on and he bowled 2 Jaffers in 2 balls, bowled around the wicket away swinger to Lammy, knocked his off pole over, and then he bowled a massive in swinger to Chris Lewis and bowled him. So his hat-trick ball was the first ball of the next over, and I was on strike. And he used to have different ways of presenting the ball, and he got to here, and I knew he was going to bowl me an in-swinger on the hat-trick ball. But it was that quick, and it swung that far that it basically hit me on the pad. It was just going down leg stump, and it hit me before I was ready to play it. And I looked up, and he was there, and we just smiled at each other. And that was his hat-trick ball in the World Cup final.
I mean, he was that performance alone sets him apart from most other cricketers. But he was He was phenomenal. You say he had different ways of presenting the ball. He had a bit of a bunch of flowers, didn't he? When he, and sort of reversed his wrist.
Yeah.
But it all happened so quickly that you couldn't. I fielded it slip all the time, really. But everything happened so quickly. It was just on. The ball was on you. You'd been batting for an hour, and you said the ball.
Just hit me.
Why was that?
I don't know. I mean, that day when he ran in, you knew that people were in trouble. There were days when he'd not jogging, but he wouldn't be at full speed. But he had such a quick arm and shoulder action that he got it down and through rapidly. But that particular day, you watched footage of him running in during that little spell, and he was charging in. And I can, we played on some hard, fast wickets, didn't we?
We did.
And I can remember you and Warren standing miles away when he was bowling.
Oh yeah, we were a good pitch length back, probably more.
More, I would say.
Yeah, 25 yards back.
Yeah, which was great. But,
I was hoping that Warren would dive in front of me.
He did a few times.
He did.
So to play with him and to play with Clive was great for all of us. It was fantastic. But you say Clive became an adopted Lancastrian. Well, so did Waz.
He did,
without a shadow of a doubt.
Yeah.
And every time he comes back here, it's a joy to see him. And he's so well loved.
I think we've been very fortunate in Lancashire that we've had Clive Farouk as well alongside Clive, who still lives down the road. Wazim, every one of the long-serving and some of the shorter-serving overseas players has always seemed to regard this as home.
Yeah. I mean, back early in my time, Stephen Jeffries.
Oh yeah, Jeff.
Jeff was. I mean, he was a great man, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was.
And he only had a couple of years with us, didn't he?
He wasn't dissimilar to Waz when he got it right, was he? Left arm, swung it.
Yeah, he wasn't quite as wasn't quite as sharp, was he?
No.
And then I guess the other standout during my period, and he wasn't here that long, was Murray.
Oh, true. Yeah.
And did Murray play 2 or 3 years? And he was another great man. Absolute cricket badger. Came to play for Lancashire and knew what all the county players were, how they played. Incredible the knowledge he had and what he was reading up on just county players. And his first 2 games, his first game for us was at Southport, and I think it was against Warwickshire. He got 16 wickets in the game and we lost. And then we had 2 days off, and the second game he got 14 wickets and we lost. So he got 30 wickets in 2 championship games, and the rest of us had done rock all.
It's interesting you say this. Lancashire was hugely successful from '88 till you finished 2002. Certainly in white ball or one-day cricket, as it was then. Why didn't we win the championship?
I don't know.
Because I mean, the size.
It wasn't. It actually wasn't for the lack of trying.
No.
It actually wasn't for the lack of trying. And we got close. I think we were runners up 3 or 4 times, and never quite got over the line.
Well, yeah. I mean, you and I have probably puzzled over this for years. Not much point puzzling over it. We didn't get there.
No, it didn't happen.
We got close, and that was it. You also hold a record, couple of records actually. You've scored more runs on Old Trafford than any other cricketer. Do you know that?
I do know that.
Not first class, but because you've played so many one-day games.
No, I do know that. And it's a nice little.
Is it ever?
It's a nice
phenomenal.
little thing, yeah. But we played on some good wickets. We had the best groundsman in the world. In Peter Marin.
And you had a very good relationship and friendship with Pete, didn't you?
Yeah, absolutely.
You encouraged him, obviously, to make good flat batting pitches. I was looking at Glenn Chappell's record here, who played 20 years, obviously, and he was a fantastic bowler. And he averages 32 here.
Does he?
With the ball, which is high.
Yeah.
Everywhere else he's in the low 20s.
Yeah.
But they were phenomenal pitches, weren't they?
Yeah, but I mean, when Chappie started, 92? that was in the midst of really good wickets. I mean, there were quick wickets, bouncy wickets, but there was no sideways movement.
No.
And once you got in, then it was great to play your shots. And I think that period was when we had those two different one-day teams, or different teams, not one-day teams. So we had the team from, let's say, 88 when we won that Refuge Cup to 91.
Yeah.
And then we had a transition period, and then we came again in 95, 96, 97, 98. And then at the end of 98, Fred came along and was part of that 98 team, and then it went from there. So there were two distinct good periods during my time. And there was an overlap of one or two people.
Let's just move on slightly. And you've been involved in the game for 40 years, and you've just mentioned Fred, Andrew Flintoff, who you managed as well and played alongside. Who are the finest cricketers in that time, both when you were playing and subsequently? Because you're fortunate enough to...
What, here? Or...
No, I think generally. But we'll start with here. Who would you say, if you had to pick one player, and I'm not talking about an overseas player for here, a homegrown Lancashire player, who's the most influential, best player in that 40 years?
I think I have to mention two or three, I think. I think Mike Atherton was a fantastic batsman. So was John Crawley. I thought John was an unbelievable player. So if there's two Lancastrian batsmen, I think they're the two that just stand out. Skill-wise, Glenn Chappell as a quick bowler, not just because you sat here, as somebody that got absolutely the most out of their ability, gave everything that they could every day for the club. So I think you two as bowlers stand out. For longevity, Mike Watkinson played for 20 years as an all-rounder, and then latterly bowled some spin as well. So those are five names, and then you can't not mention Warren Hegg as well, who kept wicket for probably, 16, 17 years for the club, and was one of the great Lancastrians.
Never saw him drop a catch.
Ever?
No, I didn't. But you must have dropped the odd one, but I never saw him. And we still keep producing players. I mean, as we're both well aware, there is a huge amount of talent around the northwest of England, and that we still produce right up to the present day. We now have Liam Livingstone and Saqib Mahmood and Matthew Parkinson. George Balderson is another one off. I won't call it a production line, but they're all destined, hopefully, to be top quality Lancashire players.
It shows that the club is set up reasonably well, doesn't it? And I love coming down here now and watching these lads play, and I love 2020 cricket as well.
I think you'd have been quite good at that, to be honest.
So
you'd have loved that,
I do love watching these lads play. 2020 cricket, just going back to that for a second, I remember there was an extraordinary AGM at Birmingham in, what year would that have been?
What, the profession, the PCA?
Yeah, and there was a vote on 2020 cricket. And every county cricketer in the country was in the room, and it was unbelievably split on would 2020 cricket work.
Well, it was treated as a joke, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was early on.
It was just, nobody was really interested. Thought it'll be a bit of a passing fad. And now look at it, look where we are.
Well, it's brought the game on in many respects.
Yeah. Talking about bringing the game on, where do you see the game going? I mean, red ball cricket in terms of Test cricket seems to be becoming concentrated really between England, Australia, India, and that's about it. The other countries, New Zealand, obviously world Test champions, but they, and they're in the process of demolishing South Africa. But where do you see red ball and white ball cricket? Is white ball cricket preeminent now?
I would say white ball cricket has certainly drawn up level with Test cricket, and we now have young pros who are being brought up on one-day cricket, really, aren't we? Mm-hmm. Back in our day, one-day cricket was very much underneath Championship cricket. Now it's certainly, I would say, drawn alongside, and if the governors of the game are not careful, it's going to take over completely. Mm.
You say that, and yet I remember our successes in one-day cricket and that instant hit of adrenaline and joy when you seem to outweigh the success and feelings that you had for red ball cricket.
Yeah, I mean, because we won, I think.
Yeah, probably.
We won, and you're right. Sat in the changing room after we'd won a close one-day game was fantastic, wasn't it? Mm. And we'd all be sharing a beer and whatever else. I think the satisfaction of getting I'm only talking from batsman's perspective, the satisfaction of getting 100 in Championship cricket was also immense. Mm. But so was the satisfaction of being in at the end to see your team home in a one-day game. Mm. And clearly, the grounds were full in those days for one-day cricket as well, weren't they? Mm. So, we were playing to big crowds, which always gets the adrenaline going as well. And we certainly enjoyed our successes, didn't we?
We did. You've had a hugely successul career, both on and off the field. Do you have any regrets about your playing career? I would think you'd obviously want to have played more Test matches.
Yeah, there's probably not many people that don't have the odd regret, is there?
No.
There's not many. And clearly, I played, in my mind, only 10 Test matches, and would love to have done better, of course. But then you look at the whole thing and you think, when you were starting out, if you'd have played for 20 years and you'd have played 100 times for England, would you have been satisfied at the start? And of course the answer to that is yes. So I don't think there's much point regretting things. Much easier and happier to think back and look at the good things.
Neil, thanks very much for chatting to us, and wish you all the best in the coming years and your still long association with cricket.
Thank you.